She didn't knock. The ballroom doors of the Valhalla Club exploded inward, gilded with splintering like bone. Sarah collapsed at the feet of a man who hadn't moved for a century, and when he saw what they'd done to her, he asked one question. By morning, 8 men would cease to exist. Blood has a taste, copper and iron, and the specific bitterness of your own failure. Sarah had been choking on it for 3 hours, ever since the man with the octagon tattoo on his neck put his boot through her ribs and asked, "Who else knows about the drive?" The Valhalla Club wasn't supposed to exist. Sarah had run through 6 blocks of rain-slicked Shanghai district alleyways, clutching the flash drive like a talisman, her silver cocktail dress, worn for a now-aborted undercover op, torn and soaked with rainwater and worse things. Behind her, sirens. Ahead, the one place the city's corrupt police force whispered about but never touched. The building rose like a black diamond, all obsidian glass and Gothic spires. No sign. No lights except the faint red glow behind windows that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. The valet stand was full of cars worth more than her annual salary. She didn't care that every instinct said predator. She didn't care that the air around the entrance felt 10 degrees colder. The men who'd tortured her had friends in every precinct, every courthouse, every government office. But they didn't have friends here. The doors opened before she touched them. The outside world, rain, sirens, pain, cut off like someone had dropped a soundproof curtain. Inside was warmth. Candlelight. The low murmur of a string quartet playing something that sounded like a funeral dirge slowed to a waltz. The ballroom was full of beautiful people who didn't move quite right. They wore masks, Venetian, ornate, expensive, but Sarah could feel their eyes tracking her through the holes as she stumbled forward. The men were too still between breaths. The women's skin had the luminous quality of pearls. When one of them lifted a champagne flute, the liquid inside was too dark, too viscous. The air smelled like roses and old pennies. Every animal part of Sarah's brain screamed, "Run!" But louder was the sound of boots hitting the marble steps outside. The doors slammed open behind her. Sarah Miller. Captain Reeves filled the entrance, flanked by 2 of the octagon, the men who'd held her in that warehouse, who'd pulled her fingernails back while asking about her sources. Reeves' dress uniform was immaculate. His smile was a knife. "You're under arrest for theft of classified materials and assaulting an officer." His hand rested on his sidearm. "Don't make this ugly." Every masked face turned. Not toward the cops with guns. Toward the dais at the far end of the ballroom, where a throne sat carved from black volcanic glass. Sarah's eyes followed theirs. He sat with the stillness of a statue in a museum, the kind you instinctively don't touch because something about it feels inhabited. 3-piece suit in charcoal gray, no mask, black hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold beauty. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's broken ribs ache with a new kind of fear. Red. Not brown red or bloodshot. Crimson. Glowing faintly in the candlelight like banked coals. He'd been watching the proceedings with the expression of a man attending an opera he'd seen 1,000 times. Now he was looking at her. At her split lip. Her swollen eye. The bruises shaped like fingers around her throat. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Sarah had 2 choices. Go with Reeves, where the octagon would finish what they started in some black site cell. Or walk toward the man on the throne who was absolutely, definitely not human, and hope that whatever he was, he hated cops more than he hated bleeding journalists. Her legs moved. Past the frozen crowd in their silk and diamonds. Past tables laden with crystal glasses filled with liquids she refused to identify. The ballroom seemed to stretch, or maybe she was just that close to passing out. She climbed the 3 steps to the dais. He still hadn't moved. Hadn't blinked. Sarah collapsed to her knees at his feet because standing was no longer optional, and held up the flash drive with a shaking hand. "Please," she whispered, and the acoustics of the room carried it like a prayer. "They'll kill me." For 3 seconds, nothing. Then he moved, a blur of motion that shouldn't have been possible, and was kneeling in front of her, one gloved hand catching her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence in his eyes. He tilted her chin up. Studied the damage. His thumb traced the bruise on her cheekbone, and his lips pulled back from teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "Who," he said, voice like silk over a blade, "the fuck did this to you?" "That's classified intel she's holding," Reeves barked, gun half drawn. "I'm invoking federal authority. You're invoking nothing." The Vampire King stood, and the room held its breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This woman has entered my domain and requested sanctuary. I am granting it." Sanctuary? This isn't the goddamn Middle Ages. The armistice of 1847. The king's tone was arctic. "The treaty your government signed with mine. Any human who enters vampire sovereign territory and invokes protection is granted ward status. This building is mine. She is now mine." Reeves' face went white. "You can't be serious." The vampire looked down at Sarah, and something almost like warmth flickered in those red eyes. "Tell me their names." Sarah's voice cracked. "The Octagon. 8 men. They. Names." She recited them. Each name felt like pulling glass from a wound. When she finished, the Vampire King turned back to Reeves. "Noted." He gestured to a figure in the shadows, a man in black tactical gear with eyes that glowed the same crimson. "August. You have until sunrise." The figure bowed and vanished. Reeves' hand fell away from his gun. He looked at Sarah with something between pity and rage. "You have no idea what you've just done." "She asked for help," the vampire said softly. "I'm providing it. Now get out of my house before I decide your badge doesn't matter." Reeves backed toward the door, his men stumbling after him. "This is war, Violin." "No." The vampire, Violin, smiled that knife-edge smile. "This is pest control." The doors slammed shut. The locks clicked with the finality of a coffin closing. Sarah tried to stand. Failed. The adrenaline was draining out of her like water from a shattered glass, and she was realizing, truly realizing, what she'd just done. The beautiful people in masks were vampires. She'd just asked their king for protection. And he'd said yes. Eric Violin knelt down again, this time lifting her into his arms with the ease of someone picking up a doll. His skin was cold through her dress, but his grip was steady. "You're in shock," he observed. "Understandable." What did I just do?" Sarah whispered. His smile returned, predatory, possessive, and somehow reassuring all at once. "You asked a Vampire King for protection, journalist. And I don't do anything halfway." He began carrying her toward the doors behind the throne. "By morning, the 8 men who touched you will be gone. By next week, everyone who gave them orders will wish they were." He glanced down at her, eyes glowing brighter. "Welcome to the Valhalla Club, Sarah Miller. You're mine now." Then the world went black. Sarah woke to the sound of rain against glass and the disorienting softness of sheets that cost more than her car. For 3 blissful seconds, she didn't remember. Then her ribs reminded her, and everything came flooding back. She bolted upright, immediately regretted it, and took stock. Clean silk pajamas, not her ruined dress. Bandages wrapped professionally around her ribs and wrists. The metallic taste of blood gone from her mouth, replaced by the mint of toothpaste someone had clearly used while she was unconscious. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city she didn't recognize from this height, furniture that belonged in a museum, and a flat-screen TV on the far wall currently showing the morning news on mute. Then she saw the headline, "Elite Tactical Unit Vanishes Overnight, 8 Officers Missing." Her hand flew to her mouth. 6 hours earlier, Jenkins had been halfway through his 3rd bourbon when August materialized in the warehouse doorway like a shadow learning to walk. Jenkins went for his gun. He was fast, Special Forces fast. August was faster. The zip ties Jenkins had used on Sarah ended up around his own wrists, attached to a chain that pulled him upward until his toes barely scraped concrete. August studied him the way an entomologist studies a pinned butterfly. "She has bruises shaped like your boots," August observed. His voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Broken ribs. Internal bleeding we had to heal with significant effort." Jenkins spat blood. "You don't know who you're fucking with." "The Octagon." "Yes, we're aware." August tilted his head. "Your king asked me to deliver a message. He said it should be poetic." Jenkins was still screaming when August left him swinging, though he'd be silent by sunrise. The warehouse would burn. The city would find nothing but ash and 8 sets of dental records that didn't match any database. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for the remote. She unmuted the broadcast. Unprecedented disappearance of what sources confirm was a classified paramilitary unit known only as the Octagon. Captain Marcus Reeves of the Shanghai District Police was last seen entering an establishment in the financial district around 2 a.m. Neither he nor the 7 men with him have been seen since. Federal investigators. The TV went dark. Sarah spun around. Eric Violin stood in the doorway she hadn't heard open, holding a silver tray with coffee and something that smelled like actual food. He was dressed differently now, black slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking less like a king and more like something out of a dangerous fashion editorial. "You're awake," he said. "Good. You were starting to worry me." "What did you do?" Sarah's voice came out hoarse. "I kept my promise." He set the tray on the bedside table with precision. "They touched you. Now they don't exist." "Coffee?" 5 hours earlier, Captain Reeves had made it home. He'd locked every door, loaded every gun, and called in favors from men who owed him blood debts. He sat in his safe room with steel doors and no windows, surrounded by UV lights he'd installed after reading classified reports about the things that lived in the dark. He lasted until 4 a.m. The lights went out all at once, a circuit breaker that shouldn't have been accessible from outside. Reeves heard the door locks clicking open one by one, each sound closer than the last. He fired blindly into the darkness, muzzle flashes illuminating nothing. Then a voice, soft as falling snow, "She had your fingerprints on her throat." Reeves never saw his killer's face. By the time the sun rose, the safe room was empty except for a wedding ring rolling across the floor and a badge with a number filed off. "You killed them." Sarah couldn't look away from him. "All of them." "I had them killed," Eric corrected, pouring coffee with steady hands. "I haven't personally killed anyone in decades. Delegation is the secret to effective leadership." He offered her the cup. "Drink. You're still in shock." She took it because her hands needed something to do. The coffee was perfect, exactly how she took it, which meant someone had been watching her long before last night. The news said 8 men. 8 men hurt you. 8 men are gone. The math is simple. Eric sat in the chair across from the bed, crossing his legs with casual elegance. Captain Reeves was found in pieces scattered across 3 districts. Jenkins burned. The others, he waved a hand. "You don't need the details. The point is, they're gone and you're safe." "Safe?" Sarah laughed, and it came out broken. "I'm in a vampire's bedroom watching the news report my kidnapper's murders and you're serving me coffee. This isn't safe. This is insane." "This is protected," Eric corrected. "There's a difference." His red eyes caught the morning light, and they were somehow sadder than they'd been last night. "The men who controlled the Octagon will come for you next. The Directorate doesn't forgive loose ends. But they can't touch you here. No one can." Sarah set down the coffee before she dropped it. "So I'm a prisoner." "You're a ward. Under supernatural law, that means you're under my protection until the threat is eliminated or you formally release the bond." He leaned forward. "I won't lie to you, Sarah Miller. This isn't a fairy tale. The people on that flash drive you're clutching will burn the world to get it back. But they'll have to go through me first." She looked down. She was still holding the drive, fingers white-knuckled around it even in sleep. "Why?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Why help me? Eric was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Because you walked into my house bleeding and asked for help. Because 8 men thought they could brutalize someone and face no consequences. Because... He stopped, studying her with those ancient eyes. Because I haven't felt anything in a very long time, and your courage made me angry. Anger is a gift when you're as old as I am. The morning sun painted the room gold. Somewhere in the city, investigators were finding empty homes and blood that wouldn't match any database. Sarah thought about the warehouse, about Jenkins' boot against her ribs, about the moment she'd chosen a vampire's protection over the law. No going back, she whispered. No, Eric agreed. By morning, 8 men went missing. By next week, the people who sent them will wish they'd never heard your name. He stood, moving toward the door with that liquid grace. Welcome to your new life, journalist. I suggest you drink your coffee. We have a war to plan. Sarah spent 2 hours exploring her prison. That's what it was, no matter what pretty words Eric wrapped around it. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Valhalla Club, 12 rooms of obscene wealth and careful beauty. A library with first editions behind glass. A kitchen stocked with food she suspected no one here actually ate. Windows that didn't open and doors that locked from the outside. She found her ruined dress cleaned and folded in tissue paper, the flash drive sitting on top like a crown jewel. Her phone was there too, completely dead. When she plugged it in, it wouldn't turn on. Wiped probably. Maybe for her protection. Maybe for his. The bathroom mirror showed her the damage in unforgiving detail. The swelling had gone down overnight, impossibly fast, but the bruises remained. Purple and yellow around her eye. Dark fingerprints on her throat. She looked like a before photo in a domestic violence PSA. She looked like someone who'd made a deal with a monster. By noon, she'd made her decision. The penthouse had a service elevator at the end of the east corridor. She'd watched a man in a suit use it earlier to deliver fresh towels. If she could time it right, slip past him. I wouldn't recommend it. Sarah spun around. Eric stood in the hallway, dressed in dark slacks and a gray sweater that made him look almost human. Almost. The service elevator requires a key card, he continued. The main elevator requires a code that changes every 6 hours. The stairs have biometric locks. The windows are bulletproof and don't open. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to keep you alive. By keeping me locked up. By keeping you safe. He moved closer, and Sarah hated that her body's first instinct wasn't fear. It was awareness, the kind that made her skin feel too tight. The directorate has a file on you now. They know you infiltrated the Octagon's poker game. They know you have evidence that could dismantle their entire operation. Do you understand what that means? It means I need to go to the press. Release everything. Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Let the public. The directorate is the public sector. Police. Military. Intelligence agencies. The press won't touch this story because the editors answering those calls are on the same payroll. Eric stopped 2 feet away. You release that drive. You become the most wanted woman in the country. They'll paint you as a terrorist, a foreign agent, whatever narrative keeps people from asking questions. And then they'll kill you. So, what's your solution? I stay here forever. You stay here until I've eliminated the threat. Then you can go wherever you want. His eyes caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and they looked almost human brown. Almost. I don't want a prisoner, Sarah. I want you alive. The sincerity in his voice made it worse somehow. Sarah pushed past him toward the elevator anyway. I didn't ask for a bodyguard. I asked for 1 night of protection. I got it. Those 8 men are dead. My debt's paid. It's not about debt. She was running now, bare feet silent on marble floors. The service elevator was right there, doors open empty. Sarah lunged inside and slammed her palm against the button panel. Nothing happened. Then Eric was there, one hand braced against the elevator doorframe, blocking her exit with his body. He wasn't even breathing hard. Please don't make me restrain you, he said quietly. I've worked very hard to treat you with dignity. Dignity? Sarah laughed, sharp and bitter. You murdered 8 people because of me. You're keeping me locked in a tower like some fairy tale princess. You don't get to talk about dignity. I killed 8 men who tortured you for hours and would have killed you regardless of whether you gave them what they wanted. His voice dropped lower, dangerous. I make no apologies for that. But I have not touched you without permission. I have not entered your room without knocking. I have given you every comfort I can provide while keeping you breathing. So yes, Sarah. Dignity. She tried to push past him. His hand caught her wrist, not hard, but immovable. Let me go. No. She shoved at his chest with her free hand. He caught that wrist too, and suddenly they were too close, her back against the elevator wall, his body caging hers without touching. His skin was cool through the thin silk of her borrowed pajamas. His eyes had gone from brown to crimson again. Let me go. Her voice cracked. You're bleeding. Sarah looked down. The bandage on her wrist had torn, a thin line of red welling where the zip ties had cut deepest. Eric stared at it like a man watching his own execution. That's impossible, he whispered. We cleaned every wound. Applied accelerant. You shouldn't be bleeding at all. Then his control shattered. He lowered his head to her wrist and tasted. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. His entire body went rigid. His eyes flared so bright they cast red shadows across the elevator walls. A sound came from his chest, half growl, half moan, that made every prey instinct Sarah possessed scream run. He released her like she'd burned him, staggering backward into the hallway. What are you? His voice was rough, foreign. What are you talking about? Your blood. He looked at her like she was a puzzle missing pieces. It's not human. I mean, you're human, but your blood. He dragged a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect arrangement. Do you have any supernatural ancestry? Fae? Witch? Anything? My parents were accountants from Ohio. Then you're a mutation. A siren. Eric's laugh was shaky. Of course you are. That's why they kept you alive during interrogation. That's why he stopped himself. Your blood acts as a stimulant to vampires. Amplifies everything. Strength. Speed. Hunger. His eyes found hers, and they were full of something dark and wanting. I could drain you dry right now and spend the next year drunk on the memory. Sarah's hand flew to her throat. But you won't. No. He said it like a vow. But every vampire in a 50-mile radius will be able to smell what you are the moment you step outside. The directorate will capture you and weaponize you. Do you understand now why you can't leave? The elevator doors started to close. Neither of them moved to stop them. So I'm not a guest, Sarah said. I'm valuable cargo. You're a woman who asked for my protection. Eric's voice gentled. And you're something rare enough that people will kill to possess you. Both things are true. I can't change that. Sarah sank down against the wall, exhausted. What am I supposed to do? Eric crouched to her level, careful to keep distance between them now. You're supposed to let me keep you alive. Learn to survive in this world. And when you're ready, when the threat is gone and you understand what you are, you can walk out that door and I won't stop you. Promise? His smile was sad. I promise. Sarah looked at the blood on her wrist, then at the vampire king who'd tasted it and walked away. Prisoner or guest? Monster or protector? Maybe he was all of it. Maybe she was too. I want access to a computer, she said finally. And coffee. Real coffee, not whatever synthetic crap you served this morning. Eric's smile widened. Done. Anything else? Teach me how to fight. If I'm staying in this world, I'm not staying helpless. He offered his hand. Now you're thinking like a queen. Director Marcus Holloway stood in the crematorium basement that didn't officially exist, looking at 8 body bags that had arrived in pieces. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and something older, something that made his instincts scream even though he'd stopped listening to those 20 years ago. Jenkins was the worst, the forensic tech said, consulting her tablet. Her hands shook slightly. Chemical burns consistent with sustained exposure to. She stopped. Sir, the report says vampire venom, but that's impossible. File it as chemical warfare agent, unknown origin. Holloway's voice was flat. He'd spent 30 years building the Octagon into the country's most effective Black Ops unit. 8 men who could disappear anyone, extract anything, and leave no trace. Now they were forensic samples in bags. The tech hesitated. Sir, Captain Reeves' last known location was the Valhalla Club. I know what it is. Holloway turned to the man standing in the shadows. Dr. Chen wore a lab coat over tactical gear, and his eyes had the particular deadness of someone who'd stopped seeing people as people a long time ago. Is the Suntech ready? We've had 3 successful tests. The UV concentration is 12 times higher than natural sunlight. Penetrates up to 6 inches of cover. Chen pulled up a video on his phone, grainy footage of something burning from the inside out, too fast to be human. Effective kill time is 7 seconds for a standard vampire. For an elder. Vylan's not an elder. He's the king. Holloway watched the video loop. How many units do we have? For prototypes. Enough for a targeted strike, not a siege. A strike is all we need. Holloway looked back at the body bags. Jenkins had been his best interrogator. Reeves had connections in every government agency from here to Beijing. The others had specialized skills that took years to develop. Vylan had erased 30 years of work in one night because of a journalist with a flash drive. Authorization code Sigma Black, Holloway said. Operation Daybreak is live. I want Vylan's head and that girl's body in this room by Sunday. Chen's smile was surgical. Yes, sir. 300 miles away, Sarah sat cross-legged on Eric's office floor, surrounded by printouts of the flash drive's contents. She'd spent 6 hours organizing the data, and her journalist's brain had finally made the connections her fear had been blocking. They've been hunting your kind for decades, she said, not looking up from the files. The Octagon wasn't just muscle. They were collectors. Eric stood by the window, watching the city lights like a man waiting for an attack he knew was coming. Show me. Sarah held up a document marked classified, Sigma clearance. This is a medical report from 2019. Subject V7, captured during a raid in Seoul. They kept him alive for 8 months. Tested his regeneration limits by, her voice faltered. They removed his organs one at a time to see how long he'd survive. V7 was Victor Constantine. One of mine. Eric's reflection in the glass was perfectly still. He went missing on a diplomatic mission. We assumed rival court assassination. There are 19 files like this. 19 vampires captured, experimented on, and disposed of. Sarah pulled up another document. But that's not the worst part. Look at this. Eric finally turned. The document she held was stamped with a logo, a stylized sun with 8 rays. Project Daybreak, weaponized ultraviolet technology. They've been building weapons, Sarah continued, using data from the experiments. UV emitters that concentrate sunlight to lethal levels. Effective range of 200 meters. Battery life of 6 hours. She met his eyes. They've been preparing for war with you, Eric. The Octagon was just the advance team. Eric took the document with hands that were utterly steady. He read in silence, and Sarah watched his jaw tighten with each line. The Directorate, he said finally. I've heard the name. Shadow organization embedded in a dozen government agencies. We thought they were focused on human threats, terrorism, espionage. They are. You're just on the list now. Sarah stood, her legs protesting after hours on the floor. The flash drive has everything. Names, locations, funding streams. I infiltrated the Octagon's poker game because I was investigating government corruption. I thought I'd found evidence of money laundering. Instead, I found a genocide. Eric's voice was cold enough to frost the windows. They've been systematically hunting us while we maintained the armistice. Pretending at peace while building an arsenal. And I walked into your house carrying the proof. Sarah's laugh was bitter. No wonder they tortured me. I wasn't just a journalist with evidence of corruption. I was the smoking gun that proves the directorate has been violating supernatural law for years. Eric set down the document and really looked at her, for the first time since she'd started explaining. You understand what this means? It means we have the same enemies. It means they'll never stop hunting you. Even if I eliminate Holloway and his inner circle, there will be others. The directorate is a hydra. Cut off one head. 2 more grow back. I know. Sarah moved to the window beside him. The city sprawled below like a circuit board, each light a life that had no idea what was coming. But that's not why you're worried. You're worried because this gives you justification to break the armistice. To go to war. The council will never approve it. They've spent centuries building relationships with human governments. This evidence proves those governments have been betraying us, and the council will want to bury it rather than risk open conflict. So we go around them. Eric raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we start an interspecies war without permission from my own ruling body? I'm suggesting we survive. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the glass, bruised and exhausted and somehow still standing. The directorate is coming for both of us. We can wait for your council to debate protocol while Holloway builds more weapons, or we can hit him first. Fast. Hard. With evidence the human press can't ignore. If we release this to the media, it exposes the existence of vampires to the world. The veil has kept us hidden for centuries. The veil is already broken. Sarah turned to face him. Holloway has 19 bodies in his basement that prove vampires exist. He has weapons specifically designed to kill your kind. The only question is whether we control the narrative or let him write it. Eric was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone making a decision that would reshape the world. The council meets in 3 days. I'll present the evidence and request authorization for a preemptive strike on directorate facilities. And if they say no? His smile was sharp as broken glass. Then I'll do it anyway, and they can exile me after we've won. He moved to his desk, pulling up secure channels on his computer. August can coordinate with my contacts in human intelligence agencies, the ones not compromised by the directorate. We'll need to move fast once this goes public. Sarah watched him shift into tactical mode, the Board King transforming into something far more dangerous. A general planning war. Eric, she said quietly. Thank you for believing me. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. You walked into hell carrying proof of a conspiracy, and your first instinct was to expose it. I don't need to believe you, Sarah. I need to keep you alive long enough to help you finish what you started. His eyes met hers, glowing faint red in the office's dim light. We're in this together now. Your war is my war. Outside, storm clouds gathered. Somewhere in the city, Dr. Chen was calibrating UV weapons. Director Holloway was mobilizing his remaining assets. The countdown to war had begun. The attack came at 3 a.m. because the directorate understood poetry. Sarah was awake, had been for hours, sitting in Eric's library with a laptop and the growing certainty that sleep was a luxury she'd lost in that warehouse. She'd been cross-referencing directorate shell companies when the windows exploded inward. Not broke. Exploded. Like something had hit them with the force of a breaching charge. Then came the light. UV drones poured through the shattered glass, 8 of them, each the size of a briefcase, covered in panels that glowed with the concentrated fury of an artificial sun. The library curtains caught fire immediately. Sarah's skin began to burn just from proximity. Eric materialized in the doorway, moving faster than thought, and the look on his face was pure animal terror. Down. He tackled her behind the marble desk as the drones adjusted their targeting. Sarah heard screaming from somewhere else in the penthouse, guards who'd been caught in the open. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, sweet and terrible. Eric's hand was over her head, his body curved around hers like a shield, and Sarah felt the exact moment the UV light found him. His entire body went rigid. The scream he bit back turned into a sound no human throat could make. Eric. Don't move. His voice was ground glass. The marble is blocking most of it. If you stand up, you'll cook from the inside out. Sarah risked a glance upward. The skin on Eric's back was blistering, blackening, cracking like overcooked meat. Smoke rose from his shoulders. He was burning alive to keep her in shadow. The drones repositioned, their mechanical were barely audible over the sound of breaking glass and dying guards. One moved directly overhead, its light painting the desk's edge in harsh white blue. Another 3 seconds, and it would have a clear angle on both of them. Sarah's hand found something on the floor, a gun, dropped by one of the fallen guards. She'd never been good with firearms. Her father had taken her to a range exactly once, and she'd hated everything about it. The noise. The recoil. The weight of holding something designed only to end life. She grabbed it anyway. Sarah, don't. She rolled out from under him, came up in a crouch, and fired. The first shot went wide. The second shattered a lamp. The third punched through the drone's central panel, and it dropped like a puppet with cut strings, light dying before it hit the ground. The other drones converged on her new position. Eric lunged, a blur of motion and fury, and caught one out of the air, crushing it in his hands despite the light burning through his palms. His face was a mask of char and regenerating flesh, red eyes blazing brighter than the UV panels. The hallway, he roared. No! Sarah ran. Behind her, Eric was destroying drones with his bare hands, moving through light that should have killed him, each movement costing him flesh he couldn't spare. She made it to the corridor, darker here, emergency lighting casting red shadows, and turned back to see him stagger. One drone had flanked him, hit him directly in the chest. The light punched through his ribs and Sarah could see his heart struggling to beat through charred tissue. She raised the gun. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Breathe, she whispered to herself. Line up the shot. Breathe. She fired. The bullet caught the drone's battery pack. It exploded in a shower of sparks and molten plastic, and the UV light died. Eric collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, smoking. The remaining drones, 3 of them, regrouped near the shattered windows. Calculating. Preparing for another assault. August appeared from nowhere, firing something that looked like a modified shotgun. The rounds were loaded with some kind of electromagnetic pulse. 2 drones dropped immediately. The third retreated through the broken window, disappearing into the night. Crypt, August snapped. Now. Buildings compromised. Eric tried to stand. Failed. Sarah shoved herself under his arm. His skin was furnace hot and slick with something between blood and ash, and half carried, half dragged him toward the hidden door August had revealed in the east wall. The panic room was exactly what it sounded like. Reinforced steel walls. No windows. Air filtration. Medical supplies. And in the center, a coffin carved from volcanic glass, filled with earth that smelled like old graves and foreign soil. Sarah lowered Eric onto the floor beside it. In the harsh LED lighting, the damage was catastrophic. Third-degree burns covered 80% of his body. His right hand was missing 2 fingers. The wound in his chest showed bone. You should be dead, she whispered. I'm old. Takes more than light. His voice was a rasp. The soil. Need to. August was already moving, scooping handfuls of the black earth and pressing it against Eric's worst wounds. Where it touched, the burns began to close. Slowly. Too slowly. How long? Sarah asked. For full regeneration? Days. Maybe a week. August's face was grim. He shielded you. Took the concentrated blast meant to kill you both. Stupid. Effective. Eric's laugh turned into a cough that brought up blood. She's alive. Barely. August stood, moving to a weapons locker on the far wall. That was a precision strike. They knew the layout. Knew where you'd be. We have a leak. Sarah's mind was racing. Or they've been surveilling the building. The Octagon had files on the Valhalla Club. Maybe the directorate. The lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in after 3 seconds that felt like hours. Red glow. Alarm klaxons. And from somewhere above, the sound of boots on marble. Many boots? They're in the building, August said flatly. He pulled out a rifle, checked the magazine. This room will hold for maybe an hour. After that they breach the door and finish what the drone started. Eric had dragged himself up to sitting, back against the coffin. His chest wound was still open, but his eyes were clear. Focused. August. How many? Tactical team. 20, maybe 30. Full Directorate Spec Ops with Suntech weapons. Can you evacuate Sarah? Not without going through them. Eric looked at Sarah then, and something passed between them. An understanding. This was the moment. The choice. She could hide in this crypt while he fought a losing battle or... Teach me, Sarah said. What? You promised you'd teach me to fight. She moved to the weapons locker, hands steadier now. I'm a quick learner. August actually smiled. She shot down 2 drones in active combat. Not bad for an accountant's daughter. I was a journalist investigating paramilitary corruption. I'm not helpless. Sarah pulled out a handgun, checked it the way she'd seen in movies, hoped she looked less terrified than she felt. And I'm not hiding while they burn down the building to get to me. Eric tried to stand. August pushed him back down. You're staying here, August told his king. Healing. We'll buy you time. We. Eric's eyes went to Sarah. We, she confirmed. Above them, something exploded. The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. August handed Sarah a tactical vest. Can you follow orders? Yes. Can you shoot someone who's trying to kill you? Sarah thought about the warehouse. Jenkins' boot. The zip ties. The hours of pain. Yes. August's smile sharpened. Then let's go hunting. Eric grabbed Sarah's wrist as she turned to leave. His grip was weak but desperate. Don't die for me, he said. Sarah leaned down, close enough to see the fear in those ancient red eyes. I'm not dying for you. I'm surviving with you. There's a difference. She pulled free and followed August toward the door, toward the sound of boots and weapons and men who thought a vampire king and a journalist would be easy prey. They were about to learn otherwise. They held for 43 minutes. August fought like violence set to music, precise, brutal, efficient. Sarah fought like someone with everything to lose and a gun she was learning to use. They took down 6 Directorate operatives in the penthouse ruins before UV grenades forced them back into the crypt. August sealed the door with his body weight while Sarah dragged a filing cabinet in front of it. That won't hold, August said, breathing hard. Blood, his own, dripped from a gash on his temple. It doesn't have to hold forever. Sarah checked her ammunition. 3 bullets left. Just long enough for Eric to heal. They both looked at the Vampire King. Eric had deteriorated. The earth had closed the chest wound, but the burns were festering. UV damage prevented normal regeneration. His skin had gone gray. His breathing was shallow. When he opened his eyes, they were dim, the red fading to something almost human. How long does he have? Sarah asked. August's silence was answer enough. Something hit the door from outside. Once. Twice. The filing cabinet scraped backward an inch. They're using a battering ram, August said. He moved to the weapons locker, started loading magazines with methodical calm. When that door comes down, I can maybe buy you 3 minutes. There's an access tunnel behind the coffin. Leads to the subway maintenance corridors. You take him and run. He can't run. Then you leave him and save yourself. Sarah looked at Eric, this creature who'd murdered 8 men for touching her, who'd taken UV burns meant for her, who'd given her protection when the entire world wanted her dead. He'd promised she could leave when she was ready. That promise meant he'd never force her to stay. Which meant she could choose to stay. Right now. In this moment. There's another option, Sarah said quietly. August turned. No. He needs blood. My blood specifically. I'm a siren. You don't understand what you're offering. August's voice was sharp. Siren blood doesn't just heal. It amplifies, heightens everything. The first taste creates a bond that's nearly impossible to break. He could drain you. Not meaning to, just because your blood makes it impossible to stop. Then you'll stop him. Sarah. He's dying. Her voice cracked. He's dying because he saved me. I'm not running while he bleeds out for my sake. The door shook again. Wood splintered. They had maybe 2 minutes. Sarah moved to Eric's side, pulling the small knife August had given her from her vest pocket. Eric's hand shot out, weak but fast, catching her wrist. Don't, he rasped. Not for me. Yes, for you. She twisted free. You said I could leave when I was ready. I'm not ready. I'm choosing to stay, which means I'm choosing this. You don't know what this means. I know exactly what it means. Sarah pressed the knife to her palm, drew it across in one quick motion. Blood welled immediately, and the scent of it hit the room like lightning. Eric's control shattered. His eyes flared bright red. His fangs, fully extended now, caught the emergency lighting. Sarah. Her name was a growl and a prayer. She pressed her bleeding palm to his mouth. Drink. The effect was instantaneous. Eric's hands came up, one gripping her wrist, the other bracing against her back, and he pulled her closer with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. His mouth sealed over the wound and he drank. Sarah gasped. She'd expected pain. Instead there was heat, spreading from her palm through her entire body like wildfire. Her nerves lit up. Her vision sharpened. She could feel his heartbeat synchronizing with hers, feel the UV damage reversing cell by cell, feel something fundamental shifting between them. The bond snapped into place like a lock finding its key. Suddenly she could feel what he felt. The euphoria of her blood hitting his system. The guilt of taking from her. The desperate need for more warring with the need to protect her. The want gods, the want that he'd been suppressing since she'd walked into his ballroom bleeding. Eric, she whispered. It's okay. Take what you need. He made a sound against her skin, half sob, half moan, and drank deeper. The burns on his back were closing. The gray fading from his skin. His chest wound sealed completely, new flesh knitting together in real time. Sarah felt herself getting lightheaded, but she didn't pull away. Couldn't pull away. Didn't want to. This was intimacy beyond anything she'd ever experienced. Not sex. Something deeper. His mind touching hers. His life force pulling from hers. The absolute trust required to let a predator feed from your veins. August's voice cut through the haze. Eric. That's enough. Eric didn't stop. Eric. August moved forward, but Eric was faster. He released Sarah's palm, his tongue sealing the wound with something that made her skin tingle. His eyes met hers, fully crimson now, glowing bright enough to cast shadows, and they were full of something raw and possessive and terrifyingly intense. Mine, he whispered. Not a question. A statement of fundamental truth. Yours, Sarah heard herself say. And meant it. The door exploded inward. The filing cabinet toppled. UV light flooded the crypt entrance and Directorate operatives poured through, weapons raised. Eric stood, fluid, graceful, completely healed, and smiled. It was the smile of an apex predator who'd just remembered what he was. August, he said, his voice resonant with power. Get Sarah to the tunnel. What are you? I said get her out. Eric's gaze never left the operatives. I'll handle this. You can't take 30 men alone. Watch me. He moved. Not like before, damaged and desperate. This was the Vampire King at full power, amplified by siren blood, and it was beautiful and terrible to witness. He tore through the first operative before the man could scream. Caught a UV rifle mid-fire and crushed it like aluminum foil. The light didn't burn him now, he moved too fast, struck too precisely. August grabbed Sarah's arm. Now. She let him pull her toward the coffin, toward the hidden tunnel entrance. But she looked back, watched Eric fight like a force of nature, and felt the bond between them singing with his exhilaration and her awe. In the tunnel, running through darkness with August's flashlight leading the way, Sarah could still feel him. The connection was a living thing now. She knew when he killed the last operative. Knew when he stood in the ruined crypt, chest heaving, covered in other people's blood. Knew when his thoughts turned to her, following her retreat through the bond like a bloodhound following a scent. He can feel you now, August said, not slowing. Always. Wherever you are. That's what the bond means. Sarah touched her healed palm, still tingling. I know. Do you regret it? She thought about Eric's mouth on her skin. The way he looked at her mind like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The feeling of his mind brushing against hers. No, she said. I don't regret it at all. Behind them, the Valhalla Club burned. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was whatever came next. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. She could feel Eric through the bond, alive and powerful and coming for her. They'd survived the Directorate's assault. Now it was time to make them pay for it. The war had truly begun. The safe house was a converted subway station 3 levels below the financial district, all exposed brick and retrofitted Victorian elegance. Sarah had slept for 4 hours on a velvet couch while August stood guard and Eric paced like a caged animal, unable to settle now that siren blood was singing through his veins. When she woke, he was sitting in the chair across from her, watching her breathe with an intensity that should have been terrifying. The council is coming, he said without preamble. They'll be here by nightfall. Sarah sat up, accepting the coffee August handed her. Her palms still tingled where Eric had fed. Through the bond, she could feel his anxiety, sharp and acidic. That's bad. That's catastrophic. Eric stood, resumed pacing. The Valhalla Club was a neutral territory under the armistice. The Directorate attacked it with military-grade weapons, and I responded by killing 37 human operatives. The Council will see this as an act of war that I started. They started it, Sarah said. The flash drive proves. The Council doesn't care about proof. They care about perception. Eric's voice was bitter. We've maintained peace for 70 years by staying in the shadows. I just dragged us into the light, covered in blood, because of he stopped himself. Because of me, Sarah finished. Say it. Because I chose you over politics. His eyes met hers. And I'd do it again. The bond hummed with the truth of it. August cleared his throat from the doorway. They're here. The council arrived in a procession of black cars and centuries of accumulated arrogance. 5 vampires who'd ruled their territories since before Sarah's country existed, dressed in clothes that cost more than houses and carried themselves like the aristocracy they'd once been. Lady Katerina of the Eastern Courts, blonde, glacial, beautiful as a knife. Lord Qin of the Shanghai dynasty, ancient enough that legends were written about him. Duchess Margot of the European Parliament, political cunning in a Chanel suit. Baron Volkov of the Russian territories, built like a tank with eyes like winter. And High Chancellor Dominic, who spoke for the council in matters of law. They stood in the safe house's main chamber, looking at Eric like a parent looks at a child who's disappointed them. Explain, Dominic said simply. Eric did. The attack. The flash drive. The Directorate's decades of vampire experimentation. The UV weapons. All of it laid out with cold precision. When he finished, Lady Katerina laughed. It was not a kind sound. So you started a war because a human journalist stumbled into your territory with a conspiracy theory? It's not a theory. I have proof. Proof that humans have been experimenting on our kind? Lord Chen's voice was silk over steel. We've known about the Directorate for years, Eric. Did you think you were the only one with intelligence networks? Sarah felt Eric's shock through the bond like ice water. You knew. His voice was dangerously quiet. We knew, Dominic confirmed. The experiments were regrettable but limited in scope. 19 vampires over 2 decades from courts that wouldn't miss them. Outcasts. Criminals. The Directorate kept their operations contained, and we maintained plausible deniability. You let them torture our people. We maintained peace. Katerina's eyes flashed. The alternative was open war with governments that have nuclear weapons and satellite surveillance. We chose survival. You chose cowardice. Volkov moved fast enough that Sarah barely saw it and had Eric by the throat, slamming him against the brick wall. Watch your tongue, boy. You may be a king, but we are the council. We've buried empires. We'll bury you. August's hand went to his weapon. The room balanced on a knife's edge. Enough. Dominic's voice cut through the tension. Volkov released Eric, who dropped to his feet, eyes blazing. The issue is not what Eric discovered. The issue is what he's done about it. 37 dead human operatives. A government building burned. You've given the Directorate exactly what they wanted, justification for escalation. They attacked me first. Because you killed the Octagon. Margot's French accent sharpened with anger. 8 highly trained operatives eliminated in one night. Did you think there would be no consequences? They were torturing her, Eric snarled, gesturing at Sarah. In my territory. The armistice requires proportional response, Dominic interrupted. Protection, yes. Sanctuary, acceptable. But elimination? You overreached, Eric. And now the council must clean up your mess. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Here's our ruling, Dominic continued. You will surrender the woman to the Directorate as a gesture of good faith. They want the flash drive and the journalist who stole it. We give them both, and the matter is resolved. Sarah felt Eric's fury through the bond, volcanic and barely contained. No, this is not a request, Katerina said. It's a direct order from the council. Refuse, and you'll be stripped of your territory and crown. Then strip them. Eric's voice was arctic. Because I will not hand her over to be murdered by the same organization that's been hunting us for decades. You'd start a civil war over one human? Chin sounded almost curious. I'd burn the world for her. The bond flared so bright Sarah gasped. She felt his absolute certainty, his willingness to lose everything rather than compromise her safety. It was terrifying and overwhelming and she wasn't going to let him destroy himself for her. Sarah stood. Every eye in the room turned to her. I have a better solution, she said. Her voice didn't shake. The vest August had given her was still blood-stained, but someone had found her a jacket, tailored, black, expensive. She looked like she belonged in rooms where power was traded. One that doesn't require Eric to commit treason or me to die. The human speaks, Katerina said dryly. How novel. Sarah ignored her, focusing on Dominic. You said the council has known about the Directorate for years. That you chose peace over justice. But you didn't know everything. She pulled out a tablet August had secured from the Valhalla Club servers. The flash drive doesn't just contain evidence of vampire experimentation. It contains proof that council members have been taking payments from the Directorate to look the other way. The room went silent. Sarah pulled up a file, turned the screen toward them. Lady Katerina. 12 million euros deposited in a Geneva account under your daughter's name. Paid by a shell company owned by Director Holloway. The same month Victor Constantine went missing from your territory. Katerina's face went white. Lord Chen. Directorate operatives conducted raids in Shanghai for 6 months without interference. Because you approved them. There are emails. Chen's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists. Duchess Margot. You personally provided the Directorate with the location of a vampire safehouse in Prague. 17 vampires died in the raid. The Directorate paid you in political favors, 3 seats in the European Parliament that went to your chosen candidates. Margot's mask of sophistication cracked. You're bluffing. I'm a journalist. Sarah's smile was cold. I don't bluff. I document. She turned to Dominic. Only 2 council members aren't implicated in the files. You and Baron Volkov. Which means you can choose. Support Eric in eliminating the Directorate and cleaning house among your own council, or I release everything to the human press. Every news outlet, every government oversight committee, every vampire court outside your jurisdiction. You wouldn't, Katerina hissed. You'd expose your own kind. I'm human. They're not my kind. Sarah's voice was steady. But they're Eric's. And he chose to protect me when your precious peace would have left me to die. So here's the deal. The council supports Eric's war against the directorate. You remove the compromised council members. And in exchange, this evidence stays buried. Dominic studied her for a long moment. You're blackmailing the Vampire Council. I'm negotiating. Sarah met his gaze. There's a difference. Through the bond, she felt Eric's astonishment bleeding into something else. Pride. Want. The desperate need to cross the room and kiss her. She kept her focus on Dominic. You have 1 hour to decide, she said. After that, the files upload automatically to 17 news organizations and the International Criminal Court. She turned and walked back to stand beside Eric. His hand found hers, squeezed once. The council members looked at each other. Katarina's face was a mask of rage. Chin looked almost impressed. Margot had gone pale. Finally, Dominic smiled. It was sharp and appraising. It seems, he said, that you've found yourself quite a queen, Eric. Eric's arm slid around Sarah's waist. Possessive. Protective. Yes, he said. I have. The message to Director Holloway was simple. I'll trade myself and the flash drive for safe passage out of the country. Midnight. Pier 17. Come alone. He wouldn't come alone. Sarah was counting on it. The abandoned docks smelled like rust and old fish, pilings creaking under the weight of decades of neglect. Fog rolled off the water thick enough to taste, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for a trap. Sarah stood at the end of the pier, wearing a wire that fed directly to August's comms and holding a dummy flash drive that would pass a visual inspection. The real one was in a safe deposit box with instructions to release it to every major news outlet if she didn't check in by dawn. Through the bond, she felt Eric's presence in the shadows, a cold, patient predator waiting for prey to stumble into range. He'd wanted to call this off a dozen times in the past hour. She'd felt his anxiety like her own heartbeat. Trust me, she'd sent through the bond. Not words, exactly. Just the feeling of certainty. His response had been wordless too. Always. But if he touches you, I'm done waiting. Now she stood alone, apparently alone, and watched black SUVs roll onto the dock with military precision. 6 vehicles. Maybe 30 men. All armed with UV rifles that glowed faintly in the fog. Holloway stepped out of the center vehicle. He was smaller than she'd expected, maybe 5 feet 10 inches, graying hair, glasses that made him look like someone's accountant. He wore a suit under a tactical vest and carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades making problems disappear. Miss Miller. His voice was pleasant. Cultured. The kind of voice that ordered torture over coffee. You're more resourceful than I gave you credit for. You sent 8 men to torture me for information, Sarah called back. I'm motivated. The octagon was enthusiastic. I'll grant you that. Holloway walked forward alone, though his men fanned out behind him in a textbook perimeter formation. But let's be honest. You didn't call this meeting because you want safe passage. You called it because you want revenge. I called it because I want this to end. Agreed. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to react. So, let's end it. The drive for your life. Simple exchange. Sarah held up the dummy drive. How do I know you won't kill me the second I hand this over? You don't. Holloway smiled. But consider the alternative. Right now, you're protected by a vampire who's made himself an enemy of both human and supernatural governments. The council wants you gone. My organization wants you dead. How long do you think Violen can keep you safe? A week? A month? Eventually, you'll slip. And when you do, someone will put a bullet in your head and the world will forget you existed. You're offering witness protection. I'm offering you a chance to disappear. New name. New life. The drive disappears with you. Violen goes back to his nightclub and his petty territorial disputes. Everyone walks away. It was a good lie. Almost believable. Sarah felt Eric's rage through the bond. He's playing you. He'll never let you live, and sent back calm. Patience. Okay, she said. I'll take the deal. She walked forward, holding out the drive. Holloway reached for it. Sarah's other hand came up with the knife August had given her, the one she'd kept hidden in her sleeve, and went for Holloway's throat. She was fast. Trauma had taught her that. But Holloway was faster. He caught her wrist, twisted, and suddenly she was on her knees with a gun pressed to her temple. Did you really think that would work? He sounded disappointed. Dr. Chin. Now. A figure stepped from behind one of the SUVs. The scientist from the directorate briefing, carrying something that looked like a flare gun crossed with a taser. He fired it into the fog. The round exploded in midair, releasing a pulse that Sarah felt as a pressure wave against her skin. And through the bond, she felt Eric's presence suddenly cut off, like a phone line going dead. All around the pier, vampires materialized from the shadows where they'd been hiding. August. 3 of Eric's night guard. And Eric himself, 20 feet away, frozen in mid-step. His eyes were wide with shock. His body wouldn't move. Electromagnetic pulse specifically calibrated to vampire neurochemistry, Chin explained, almost giddy. Paralyzes them completely for approximately 6 minutes. More than enough time. Holloway's men raised their UV rifles. No, Sarah whispered. Yes. Holloway hauled her to her feet, gun still pressed to her head. You wanted to end this, Miss Miller. Congratulations. You just killed your monster. Sarah's mind raced. 6 minutes. The UV rifles would burn through Eric and his guards in seconds. August couldn't move. The bond was silent. She was alone. Except she'd been alone before. In a warehouse. With 8 men who thought she was helpless. She'd escaped then. She could fight now. Sarah let herself go limp, dead weight in Holloway's grip. He adjusted his stance to compensate, exactly like Jenkins had done in the warehouse, and she drove her elbow backward into his groin with everything she had. He gasped, grip loosening. She spun, grabbed the gun, twisted it away. The weapon discharged, shot going wide, and suddenly Holloway was stumbling backward and Sarah had a gun in her hands. She'd fired 3 rounds before her conscious mind caught up. Center mass. The way August had taught her. Holloway went down. His men opened fire, not at her, at Eric. UV light flooded the pier. Sarah watched Eric's skin start to smoke, watched him strain against the paralysis that locked him in place, and something in her chest broke open. She ran. Not away. Toward. Stand down. She pressed the gun to the back of Chen's head. He'd been watching his weapon work, fascinated by the carnage. Now he froze. Turn it off or I put a bullet in your brain. You won't. She shot him in the leg. He screamed, collapsed. The next one goes in your skull. Turn. IT. Off. Chen fumbled with the device, hands shaking. Hit a switch. The pressure wave dissipated like released tension. Eric moved. What happened next lasted maybe 30 seconds, but Sarah would remember it for the rest of her life. Eric tore through Holloway's men like a force of nature unleashed, all the rage and fear and helplessness of the past 6 minutes channeled into pure violence. August and the night guard joined him. The UV rifles were crushed, the operatives eliminated with surgical precision. When the fog cleared, only Sarah and the vampires remained standing. Eric crossed the pier in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms hard enough to hurt. His face was buried in her hair, his hands shaking against her back. You ran toward me, he said against her skin. Into the light. You could have run away. I chose you, Sarah said simply. In the crypt, at the council, here. I keep choosing you. He pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes blazing red in the darkness. Blood, not his, spattered his face. He looked like the monster the stories warned about. He looked like hers. Sarah Miller, he said, voice rough with emotion. Will you stand beside me? Not as my ward. Not as my protected. As my equal. My partner. My. Yes. She didn't let him finish. Whatever you're asking. Yes. Through the bond, she felt his relief, his joy, his fierce possessive love crash into her like a wave. He kissed her then, desperate and claiming and tender all at once, tasting like blood and smoke and victory. When they broke apart, Holloway was crawling toward the edge of the pier, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Sarah walked over, gun still in her hand. He looked up at her with eyes full of pain and calculation. You can't kill me. I'm unarmed. Wounded. It would be murder. Sarah thought about the warehouse. About Jenkins' smile. About the hours of pain and fear. About 19 vampires who died in the directorate's labs. She thought about the woman she'd been before all this, the journalist who believed in law and justice and the system. That woman was gone. You're right, she said. Then she stepped aside. Eric. The Vampire King's smile was terrible to witness. My pleasure. Sarah didn't watch. She walked back to August, handed him the gun, and felt Holloway's scream cut off abruptly behind her. When Eric rejoined her, his hands were clean. The body was gone. The pier was silent except for the lap of water against pilings. The directorate will send others, August said quietly. Let them. Sarah's voice was steady. We have the evidence. The council's support. And we have each other. Eric's hand found hers. Through the bond, she felt his agreement. The war wasn't over. But they'd won the first battle. And Sarah Miller, journalist, survivor, queen, was just getting started. The sun rose over Pier 17 like a curtain call, painting the carnage in shades of gold and red. Sarah stood beside Eric, watching the light creep across the dock, turning the fog from gray to amber. 30 bodies. 24 UV rifles destroyed. And Director Holloway's blood slowly washing away with the tide. We should go, August said quietly. He was already on his phone, coordinating cleanup crews that didn't officially exist. Sunrise is dangerous for more than one reason. Eric didn't move. He was staring at the horizon with an expression Sarah had never seen before, something between exhaustion and peace. I haven't watched a sunrise in 83 years, he said. The UV burns. Can't risk it. You're risking it now. I have siren blood in my system. It buys me maybe 10 minutes before the damage outpaces regeneration. He looked down at Sarah, and his smile was soft. I wanted to see one with you. Through the bond, she felt what he couldn't say. That he'd thought he would die on this pier. That her running toward him instead of away had fundamentally changed something in his centuries-long understanding of what he deserved. Sarah laced her fingers through his. His skin was already warming from the approaching light, not burning yet, but close. We won, she said. We survived, he corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Eric considered this. Behind them, August was arguing with someone about body disposal logistics. Around them, the city was waking up, car horns, delivery trucks, the ordinary machinery of human life continuing because most people would never know how close they'd come to a war. Yes, Eric said finally. Survival is what you do when you have no choice. Winning is what you do when you refuse to accept the limitations other people place on you. His thumb traced circles on her wrist. You won, Sarah Miller. You walked into hell, came out holding a vampire king's heart, and made the world bend to accommodate you. We made the world bend. We, he agreed. The sun cleared the horizon. Eric's skin began to smoke. Time to go, Sarah said. They went. 1 month later, the Valhalla Club reopened. The penthouse had been rebuilt, same obsidian glass, same Gothic elegance, but with reinforced security that made Fort Knox look amateur. The ballroom had been restored to its former glory, all candles and champagne and beautiful monsters in designer clothes. But the throne room was new. 2 chairs now sat on the dais, carved from volcanic glass and upholstered in black velvet. Equal height. Equal placement. A statement in furniture. Sarah sat in the left chair, dressed in black silk that probably cost more than her first car, and wearing diamonds that Eric had presented to her with the casual nonchalance of someone giving flowers. Her hair was styled. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like she'd been born to this, like she'd always belonged in rooms where power was currency and immortality was the price of admission. The Vampire Council stood before them. All 5 members, though Katarina's seat would be empty soon, she'd been formally censured and was facing removal. Margot looked diminished somehow, her political maneuvering no match for documented proof of treason. Lord Chin remained inscrutable. Volkov looked almost approving. Dominic, as always, spoke for them. The council recognizes Sarah Miller as consort to the Vampire King, with all rights and privileges therein. His voice carried through the ballroom. She is granted safe passage in all vampire territories, protection under supernatural law, and a seat at council proceedings should she choose to attend. Not consort, Eric said quietly. Queen. The room held its breath. The title of queen requires, Dominic began. Requires strength. Political acumen. The ability to command respect from our kind. Eric's hand found Sarah's. She blackmailed the council into supporting a war. She killed the head of the directorate with her own hands. She bonded with a vampire king and lived to speak about it. If that doesn't qualify her for the title, then your standards are outdated. Silence. Long enough that Sarah felt the bond humming with Eric's tension. Then Volkov laughed, a deep, booming sound. He's not wrong. The girl has teeth. She earned her place, Chin added. More than some who were born to it. Dominic studied Sarah with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Do you accept the responsibilities that come with this title? The politics, the violence, the enemies you'll inherit simply by sitting in that chair. Sarah thought about the warehouse. About running through rain-soaked streets with nowhere to go. About collapsing at a monster's feet and begging for mercy. She thought about who she'd been then, and who she'd become. I accept, she said. Her voice didn't waver. Then by the authority vested in me by the Council of Elders, Dominic said, I recognize Sarah Miller as Queen of the Night District, co-sovereign of the Valen Court, and equal partner to Eric Violin in all matters of law and governance. The ballroom erupted in applause, some genuine, some political, all acknowledging that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Eric leaned over and kissed her temple. Through the bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that this was exactly where she belonged. How does it feel? He murmured. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Sarah said. The celebration continued around them, vampires dancing, politics being negotiated in shadowy corners, August standing guard with the night guard fanned out behind the thrones. The flash drive's contents had been released in strategic doses to human media, enough to cripple the directorate without exposing the full scope of the supernatural world. The armistice held, barely, but now it was a peace maintained by mutual respect rather than willful ignorance. Later, when the guests had gone and the ballroom was quiet, Sarah stood at the repaired windows looking out over the city. Eric joined her, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. Do you miss it? He asked. Your old life. Being human in a human world. Sarah considered the question honestly. She thought about her apartment, cramped and cheap. Her job, underpaid and underappreciated. The belief that law and justice were the same thing, that good people were rewarded and bad people were punished. I miss the innocence, she admitted. The belief that the system worked. But I don't miss being powerless. I don't miss running. You'll never have to run again. No, she agreed. Now I'm the thing people run from. Through the window, she saw her reflection, a woman in silk and diamonds, standing in the arms of a creature from nightmare, looking more alive than she ever had in her previous life. A journalist had asked her earlier, someone brave or stupid enough to interview the new vampire queen. Aren't you afraid? They'd asked. Living with a monster? Sarah had smiled, the same cold smile Eric wore when he was being dangerous. I'm not afraid of the monster, she'd said. I am the monster's heart. And that makes me the most dangerous thing in this city. Now, watching the city lights, feeling Eric's presence through the bond like a second heartbeat, Sarah understood what she'd really meant. She'd walked into darkness looking for salvation. She'd found partnership instead. Power. Purpose. She'd found home. They're going to tell stories about us, Eric said quietly. The vampire king and the journalist who became his queen. What kind of stories? Cautionary tales, probably. About what happens when you break the rules. Sarah turned in his arms, meeting those red eyes that had once terrified her and now felt like safety. Good, she said. Let them be afraid. Let them know that if you touch what's mine, there will be consequences. Eric's smile was pure predator. Our enemies are going to regret the day you crashed my ballroom. They already do. She kissed him then, deep and claiming and full of promise. Through the bond, she felt his love, his desire, his absolute devotion. When they broke apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Ready for another night? Eric asked. Sarah looked at her throne, at the kingdom they'd built from carnage and choice, at the life she'd claimed from the ashes of who she used to be. Always, she said. They walked back to the throne room together, king and queen, monster and heart, equals in the darkness. The doors closed behind them with the finality of a story ending and a reign beginning. Outside, the city continued its ordinary dance. But in the Valhalla Club, where creatures of legend gathered and power was traded like currency, everyone knew the truth. The girl who'd stumbled through broken doors covered in bruises had become the queen who would burn the world before she let anyone hurt her again. And the vampire king who'd asked, "Who the fuck did this to you?" had found something worth more than his crown, someone who chose him not because she was helpless, but because she was strong enough to stand beside him. By morning, 8 men had gone missing. By nightfall, a queen had been crowned. And in the darkness between, justice, real justice, the kind written in blood and bound by choice, had finally been served.